Hi, I'm Jerry Flynn, host of the BSD Q&A sessions. The Q&A sessions provide a marvellous opportunity for all our students, especially the students who have a passionate interest in the performing arts and are curious about a career within the industry. We get to meet acclaimed professionals, award-winning professionals in their field, be they actors, designers, writers, directors and stage managers. So join us for the BSD Q&A sessions.
My guest today is a British actor who has been in the profession for over 50 years. He established himself as a very successful classical actor, working predominantly at theatres such as the Royal Shakespeare Company and latterly at Shakespeare's Globe, where he also serves on the board of that theatre, both within London and in North America. This actor has established a very successful career on both sides of the Atlantic, and in fact is extremely well known for a very popular TV series from the US. Without further ado, I'd like you to welcome Joseph Marcell.
Joseph, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving of your time. It's a fantastic honor for myself and for all the students who recognize you, if not by name always, but certainly by character. My colleagues, my American colleagues, are very excited about this. I'm very jealous, as I have received a few emails. During the course of this, I've got questions all over my desk from the students. I might mention a student's name or two, but generally they are the questions that have come in. I'm going to start straight away with one or two aspects of your life, which I know pretty well, but I didn't know that you grew up, or certainly were born, in St. Lucia, the Caribbean. You moved to England. One of the first questions, can you tell us about your schooling? For example, did you get much exposure to studying drama and the performing in plays?
What, at school? Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, I didn't choose to come to England. I was as a child. My father was recruited by I think it was Enoch Powell and those people after the Second World War to come and rebuild.
The Windrush. Are you the Windrush generation? That's in.
I was before the Windrush. Because the Windrush was mostly people from Jamaica.
Oh, okay.
But we're much further down the Caribbean Sea. So our journey went via Italy, via Genoa.
Whoa!
So I mean, the Windrush is an all-encompassing word, but it's really, it really dealt with the people in Jamaica rather than people in, say, Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, etc., etc. Right. Yeah. So my journey was via. We went via Genoa and then across Europe and into Waterloo in London. I was just about 7 years old.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And what was school like when you got to the UK? I mean, where I think one of the questions I'll be coming to really is how schooling, was it the kind of schooling that triggered the idea that you wanted to be an actor?
Oh no, certainly not. I mean, I am the son of an immigrant. The idea was to come to England, take my father, because of my father's work. My father was a carpenter, and he was recruited to work with a company called Terson's, which is now defunct or has been taken over by McAlpines. Wow. And so he worked for them all his life. And so, he was allowed to bring his family with him. So that's why we accompanied him. Schooling was interesting. I mean, I went to a place called Ilderton Primary School. Then I went to Peckham Manor School. Then I did a stint at Brixton College, at Wandsworth College, and all those kinds of places. But to actually think about acting, I mean, that came purely by accident.
Well, do you remember when that first thought came in? I mean, you say it was by accident, but when was that first moment when you thought, I want to be an actor? And Do you believe, can you see anything now in retrospect in your early life that you believe led to this dream, you might say, coming true?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know exactly how it happened. I was doing what was known as industrial training. I was training to be an electrical engineer, and I was doing my part of my practical work in Southampton at the first water-cooled reactor power stations built in England, a place called Calshot in Southampton. And I'd be there for the week, and I'd come home on a Friday night. My friends would pick me up at Waterloo, and we'd go and do what young men did at the time, get drunk and try to meet girls, you know.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and we crossed the Waterloo Bridge into the Strand, and we walked past the Aldwych Theatre, which was the London home of the Royal Shakespeare Company at that time. And there was an event in London during the 60s and early 70s called the World Theatre Season, organized by a man called Michel Sardani.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, a bigwig within the management of the Royal Shakespeare Company, the
Well,
trustee.
Yes,
Royal
old Vic, I think. He was one of the old Vic titans as well, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, a classical titan, shall we say.
Yeah.
And that it just happened that the World Theatre Season was on. We crossed the bridge, we walked past the Aldwych, and there was these huge posters of, you know, non-white black performers. And we'd never seen that before. So we decided maybe we should go in. So we paid £0.50, 2 and 6, and sat up in the gods and watched something called Black New World. And they were the company at that time was called the American Negro Company,
Whoa.
which later became the Negro Ensemble. So, I mean, and that was when it happened. I mean, I just thought, my God, this is amazing. This is what I think I want to do.
Wow.
And it took about sort of 9-10 months to actually, for the idea to come into fruition. But yes, that was when it happened.
I had no idea. I mean, that really coincides, I suppose, with the civil rights era. You know, suddenly it was all inclusive. People were fighting to be seen. I'm thinking of Sidney Poitier in the cinema, of course, in the late 50s and the 60s. But the funny thing is about that name, the Negro Ensemble or whatever, it takes me back to who was the great American actor that came over in the late 19th century, the middle of the 19th century?
Yes, Ira Aldrich.
Ira Aldrich, yeah. So names have not changed, but I was quite amazed at that. Well, I mean, obviously, I didn't get the answer maybe one of the students wanted about hoping that school was the platform.
No, I mean, school is never the platform. I mean, school is you know, an academic. You know, so school points you in the right kind of academic direction, but it's you know, it's how you think, and
sure.
School teaches you to think, and you make choices.
But do you think
I never appeared in plays at school because you know, young black boys weren't in plays in school.
Right. But if we look at that today and look at that, do you believe that studying theatre, studying drama within a school curriculum is valuable to a student's development? If so, why? That was one.
Well, there's a difference between studying drama and studying literature and studying plays. I mean, if we take Shakespeare's plays are written to be performed, not studied, because you know, because most of the understanding comes from your perception rather than.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I'm in Hamlet at the moment, and there's a young actor who was at college. His formal education was at college, and my wife works at his college, and she said, I think he played many pantomimes, Christmas pantomimes at school. And my wife said, I think this boy has talent. And So we helped him, and he went to drama school and he studied acting, and he's now playing Laertes in Hamlet. And he's playing my son.
Yes, I saw the photos. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, on that theme there, Joseph, I mean, what if somebody, one of the questions, if you were starting out today, what would you tell an actor starting out today, or what do you wish somebody had told you when you were starting out back in the 60s, the 70s, late 60s?
60s, 70s is correct. What would I, it's the arena never changes, really. I mean, the personnel and the entertainment changes, but the arena remains the same. My experiences then and what I observe now are not the same. What worked for me then, I don't think works now. I was at a time when there was a lot of experimental theatre in Britain. There was quite a lot of cross-fertilization between Britain and the United States, the off Broadway type things. So, we mixed and we learned a lot. I mean, there were many, many more playwrights, many more politically astute playwrights then, and the political play was, expected. Now it's an entirely different thing, and now it has to be musicals. So my advice to a young actor now is, learn to sing and dance, and, forget the acting, because the acting is secondary, because that's not really what is expected of you. But what I would say to my son is go to drama school and learn about acting, learn about every aspect of acting, because it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. There are people who do the 100 meters and get the gold medal. They get, before they're 25, they're making huge films and stuff, but those are very few and far between.
It's an observation that, I love reading biographies of some of the great actors of the past. And I was reading one recently, Ralph Richardson. And I remember him in that kind of early part of his life where he's thinking, what should I do? And he goes to see a friend in a play, and he thought, I'd like some of that, and so I got in touch with Barry Jackson in Birmingham and said, I'd like you to teach me how to be an actor. It's that idea but it was that idea that it is time and again, there was a generation before ours that knew it was purely a craft, like carpentry, like sculpture, that you can learn it, and then if the muse is there, you're taken on to another level.
Absolutely.
Well, what takes me on? I mean, what do you believe? A good question came in this morning. What do you believe are the essential qualities that makes an actor today different from yesteryear? And what are the most important skills that they should have today to perform?
Okay. Firstly, you need to define the word actor to me. Are we talking about people who act on television? Are we talking about people who act in films? Are we talking about people who write their own stuff and perform it? What are we talking? Are we talking about people who play on stages, and people who play in modern plays and in classical plays? What does actor mean?
Yes, and that's all right. We'll keep that question hovering there, because the next question almost goes to the heart of it for you personally. Is, look, you are having a very successful career in theatre, in TV, in film. Yet, which is your favorite medium and why? And what challenges does each of those media present to you as an actor?
There isn't. I mean, there isn't really a favorite, but in the end, I mean, it's purely mercenary. I mean, it really is. Films pay 10,000 times better than theatre. I mean, and 4,000 times, 6,000 times better than television. That's the way it is. And but really, each discipline or each medium, I suppose, has its constraints, and it's really hard. I mean, and that goes back to the previous question: is what kind, what do you mean by actor? What do you mean by what inspires you? Because really, I think American actors are more. They're more specific in what they do. They specialize. You have American movie actors, and that's all they do. You have American actors who do musicals, stage musicals. That's all they do. You have American actors who work in television. That's all they do. And you have American actors who work on the stage, sometimes in the classical theater, sometimes in modern plays. Now, all of these, it is not often you find a Robert Duvall who can do the movies, who can do the theater, who can do the classical plays, because that's really hard. However, with a British actor, you are expected to be able to do all those things. So you could be in a show for 2 years, and then you are expected to play Hamlet at the Royal Shakespeare Company or whatever.
Yeah,
and
Al Pacino has that. Al Pacino, of the modern big star actors, is one who is like that.
Yes,
and
the whole American Buffalo and all that. Yes,
and Stacey Keach was, and as you say, there's. Well, I guess, I mean, that flexibility, one of them would be flexibility. One of those.
No, well, I would call it. Sorry, Jerry, I'd call it versatility.
Versatility, yeah. I was interested a few weeks ago. I did a Q&A with Phil Davis, and he said he loves them all, like having children. There's not one favorite always. There's always one at that moment is your favorite. Then another one's your favorite. I thought that was a good analogy. And I think Mark, a long time ago, mentioned about flexibility, versatility, and I think resilience as well. In terms of essential qualities, the resilience, the skin. And we went off in a direction about that, about confidence and just having that ability to take the rough with the smooth. But moving on, I mean, another question, which I thought was rather good, superstitions. It's a profession full of it. Are you a superstitious actor? Do you have any rituals before a performance?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are many superstitions, and I pretend that I don't subscribe to them, but I do really. Well, I don't. Let's say I don't challenge them.
Yeah.
Like
just in case. Just in case.
Just in case. You never know. You have to cover all your bases. I do, the stuff from the Scottish play and whistling and all that kind of stuff. But really, my ritual is simply when I'm on stage, or I'm doing a play, I find that to have a location, a name, a purpose, is simply using, I do it every day. Before every performance, I do my sit-ups, and within my sit-ups, I use the Michael Chekhov mantra, to the actor. Why am I here? What do I hope to achieve? What am I willing to sacrifice to achieve it, etc., etc. Yeah, and those are my rituals. Yeah, and maybe sometimes I pray, but so God help, angel help me. Please muse, sit on my shoulders. But the Michael Chekhov mantra is, and sit-ups have become my ritual.
Well,
yeah.
Knowing how busy you are, you must have a six-pack. That's enviable.
Not quite. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, overfilled six-pack. Yeah.
One student thinking has obviously heard this expression and probably seeing it as a sort of a connection with life itself outside of thinking of acting. But they've asked, when a director says to you, "Be yourself," Mr. Marcell, how do you translate that into practical ways?
Be yourself.
It is annoying when you sometimes hear it. You think,
Yeah.
oh, what do you mean? And I like
Yeah.
it. And I thought, well, go on, give it a shot.
That's actually an old-fashioned question.
Yeah.
Because the way we work these days is that it's the director would ask you, how would the character behave in such a situation? How would the character respond to such a situation? Sometimes in film, they'd ask you to just be yourself and calm down and stuff like that. But mostly it's about the character, how the character would behave. It's not a question I've been asked for over 40 years. So I really don't know how to answer it.
Well, if of the roles that the characters you played, particularly theatre at the moment, I'm keeping a tight wrap on the theatre side for the moment, but of the characters that you've played, I suppose, if any of them, has any of the roles taught you something new about how to approach who you are and what your life's about? In that, have you got anything from a role where you really have come away and felt, I've grown from that? I mean, I've developed.
Yes, I've come back from many roles saying, God, I'm exhausted. Yeah. You can't help but be informed. You have your life informed by what you do, but it's really this might sound cold and unfeeling, but it's really about how you are able to harness the modicum of talent that you have, perhaps a greater part of the technique that you've learned over the years, and how you manage to present the character while standing outside of the character. Okay, that's the character, and you're standing outside, and still the two are the same. So you have the two characters, yourself and the character you're playing, they are the same. And then within that, this one brings what is known as the sixth sense. So you have your five senses, ear, mouth, tongue, etc. And this one brings that sense, the sense of being able to speak and feel and hear what you're saying, what effect what you're saying is having on the people who are listening. If you're being comedic, the joke doesn't go well, nobody responds. You can hear it and still remain, almost three people, and still remain on message. Now, what you learn in the course of a lifetime of acting, or your job, because that's what it is that you learn, it gives you a certain confidence that you can gauge whether you're playing Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, whatever. You can gauge expression you need to use within your voice, within your body, and that. Now, have you learned anything from that? Of course you have, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. The more difficult it becomes. Actually, it does not get easier, because what happens is that your imagination has been stimulated so much that you begin to know so much. Everything you do requires a certain, the only word I can think of is fine in the artistic sense. Everything has to be fine. It has to be just so. And that is impossible to get. And that's you learn that perfection is impossible to achieve.
Sure. Well, I'll come to it in detail in a short while, but I mean, you're involved in a production at the moment where I can't help but imagine that if you're playing whether it's Polonius, but certainly Hamlet, you're going to learn you're going to have your eyes, your soul open to aspects of what it is to be an element of humanity, of thinking like a human being in a way that maybe parts of yourself have not actually been opened to. But I'm intrigued by this idea that I remember it was a long time ago, Judi Dench said to me that, you know, actors can, whatever they are, they can often become very, very self-aware in ways that other people may not be. Because by knowing what you are made up of, you know how far you've got to reach out for a role to pull it into you, or how much you've got in you that is you can push out to the role. And it takes an observant self, I think, for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, acting is not therapy. I mean, you know, they'd like it to be, but it isn't.
No.
And you have to learn the lines, interact with your fellow actors, and don't trip over the furniture. I mean, in the end, that's really what it is.
We're going back to Ralph Richardson saying it's the art of stopping people coughing.
Exactly. But you know, but that, I mean. If you're playing Hamlet, if you're you're in any Shakespeare play, doesn't matter what you're playing, and you really are within the life of the play, whatever you need is there. You know, if you say, "The carriage awaits, my lord," that's the only thing you can say if you were that character in real life in that situation. Because, or after you've done, you know, Hamlet has just messed around with Polonius and all that good stuff, and comes and begins to be or not to be. That's the only thing he can say, because Polonius has opened his mind in a way that, you see what I mean? The action moves on. Now, for us, you know, we're almost like, I would say, Mark Antony coming into the forum and seeing the body of Caesar punctured with, you know, all 26 wounds, and going, "Almighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low?" It's that. It is the only thing you can say. You know, you cannot come up with a better phrase or a better speech. That is, you know, that is it. And that has been there for over 500 years. Now, we're not there to stop them coughing. We're not there to keep them out of the rain. We're not there to, you know, to trip over the furniture or to stop ourselves tripping over. We're there to stimulate their imaginations. And that is what you learn in the course of your career, is that whereas a movie actor has behind him the situation, the properties, the cars, the explosions, what we have is words. And what a stage actor learns in the course of his life, in the course of his professional life, is that you can make those words real. So when you talk about heaven, the word itself stimulates the imagination of the audience, and they may not understand, they may not be able to define it for you, but their perception of that word is perfect.
Who is the question from a young student in my GCSE group? Who is the greatest actor you have seen perform, worked with, or have known? And what makes them great?
Oh, God. Well, the greatest actor I have known and performed with, and what makes them great. Right, firstly...
Maybe not performed with, maybe seen perform, maybe you've worked with them.
Okay. Firstly, if I knew what made them great, I'd put it in a bottle and you'd be paying a lot of money for it.
Right.
one actor that I have never met, and I never will because he's passed away, is the American movie and television stage actor Jason Robards.
Oh yeah, yeah.
In my opinion, was probably the best American actor of my youth. My favorite British actor, and I had the pleasure of working with him, the honor even, was the late John Wood.
John Wood.
He was, in my opinion, you know, the British actor of the 20th century. Wow. But, you know, you can put my opinion with a pound and still not be able to buy a cup of coffee. So there you have it. Why? Because in both cases, those men, and it doesn't matter whether they achieved it or not, I don't know if they did, but I watched the process. They tried to find the definitive of everything that they did. John Wood's Saturninus in Titus Andronicus is a study in rakishness. It's just amazing. And Robards playing Nixon is something to behold. And it is, and there are lots of others, and that's the problem with, you know, there are many other actors, you know, that I admire, just, but, you know, but yes, it's, and those actors have there's something volatile and dangerous and at the same time febrile about that you know, that keeps you on your toes, you know, to be on stage with them, but to actually watch them work on stage. Because, yes, those are my two.
Okay, one last thing in terms of the acting, of where we're at the moment and the themes that I'm looking at. Question came in, great question for me, from the teacher point of view, but it was a student. She's been reading her books. Konstantin Stanislavski, Mr. Marcell or Bertolt Brecht, who do you believe has had the biggest impact on theatre, and who do you feel more connected with as an actor?
Well, Stanislavski gave us, well, he didn't, but indirectly, the method came from that. I'm a Michael Chekhov man myself. I believe in psychological gesture more than the other thing.
Yeah.
Bertolt Brecht. You know, it's really difficult to categorize those people, in the sense that Brecht was not really a theorician. I mean, Brecht actually did what he said, you know. In my opinion, forget Mother Courage and all that, but, you know, one of his great poems, So Many Questions, you know, it goes something like, Julius Caesar conquered the world, who made his breakfast? You know, that kind of stuff. And yeah, each man in his time had made a contribution to the world of our imaginations, and I think it would be sort of churlish of me to say which is better. But yeah, there are aspects of Stanislavski that you know, without you could never really fully analyze and prepare a role. There are aspects of Michael Chekhov that forces you to understand that, you know, you do not need to go out and you know, carry trash cans to understand what it is to be somebody who works as a dustman. There are Michael gave us the psychological gesture, which moved away from that, and Mr. Brecht, what he did was he was able. And that's one thing about, you know, a tragedy is a tragedy, and a comedy is a comedy, and a musical is a musical, and et cetera, et cetera. And Mr. Brecht was able to show you that a song actually does enhance your understanding of the drama.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know that especially in Arturo Ulla. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong there, but yeah, each contribution is priceless and invaluable.
I think the theatres today would be far poorer if we didn't have either of them.
Absolutely,
you know,
I agree.
Brecht has always appealed to the director, the actor, Stanislavski. But it's an interesting question. It's more, you know, this is a student who's very keen on studying drama for their GCSE and going on to
no, I think it's a really fair question, but unfortunately, I mean, it's a question that, you know, when you take for a performer, be it in film or in television or on stage, when you accept the mantra of just before you step on, you have to have a name, a location, the place. You know, you cannot survive without those things. Sure. You know, you cannot play any character without those things.
Well, let me segue into the next part of the questions for you. I run a theatre trip every year, and one of the most memorable productions I saw was the Adolphus Tips 9/6 something. I can't remember the name, but it was done at Shakespeare's Globe. Emma Rice, the director, very much actually a kind of a Brechtian aspect to that production. But moving on to the aspect of Shakespeare. Shakespeare's played a huge role in your life. You've played a huge role in Shakespeare's life. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a very definite association with Shakespeare's Globe as an associate, can I say director, an associate artist for sure. You've got involvement with Shakespeare's Globe representing them in the States. So I want to look at Shakespeare for a moment. Just to tell our listeners or the audience who will be watching, you're playing Polonius at the moment in a colorblind, gender-blind, if those are the phrases, production at the Young Vic.
Young Vic.
Fantastic reviews. So I'm going to dive in first there. You're playing Polonius. What is your interpretation of the character? Where did your idea come from, so to speak?
I've seen many Poloniices, and like everybody else, if you are walking down a well-trodden path, you try to find places where there aren't many ruts, and that's what I attempted to do. I tried to understand what it is to be a patriot, a man who believes in the state that he serves. You know,
which I think is right for the role. I mean, that's
well, exactly, yeah. And it really doesn't matter whether he makes a mistake as to whether Hamlet loves or is mad. That's got nothing to do with it. What is important, that it's his job. He does his job really well, and you know, he was the first to see that Hamlet is mad. However, I try to find the positive aspects of the character. You know, family, caring about the state, his love of words. You know, the way he drifts around a point and allows you to you think he doesn't know what he's doing, and then he grabs you. You know, those magic moments. Yes, you know, to have what does he says? Since brevity is the soul of wit and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief. You know, stuff like that. So a man who is, I suppose, slightly pompous, and and obeying, cares and loves his family. I think the aspect of family, I mean, it has been tried before, but not quite as successfully as we have in Greg Herzog's production. Yeah, so you have a contrast between, you know, the royal family and, you know, the next one down. I just simply tried to find what was good about him. You know, what made him proud, you know. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. A question that's somebody's done their homework here, and I like this. They've read that Dame Judi Dench, Sir Ian McKellen, Michael Pennington. They've read that these major figures, you might say, of performing Shakespeare, have said, and they're not quoting them, but they've said that young actors today aren't so interested in learning to act Shakespeare. So my question for Mr. Marcell is, does he agree with this? And if so, why? And what is it they need to do to learn? There we go.
You don't want much, do you? Well, firstly, the time we live in is a time of instant gratification. It's you know, easy access, etc., etc. The problem for us with Shakespeare's work is that it requires a lot of self-denial and kind of shoulder to the wheel, and, you know, teeth to the grinding stone and all that kind of stuff. It requires hard work, and the return is, you know, minimal. I mean, kind of, you starve. But what it does for you, and what it has done for the last 500 years, is that it has made you understand, perceive the effect that a word has on you and on the people that hear you. And it teaches you about thoughts, how a thought is shaped, how a thought is presented, how a thought has its fulcrum at the end, not in the middle or at the beginning. So you have to go all the way. It requires such discipline. I mean, and it's wonderfully frustrating, because we don't talk that way, and yet we do, you know, if you see what I mean. What was the other part of that? Oh yes, and young act. I don't know. I mean, people still see, you know, Shakespeare as something that should be in a museum, and, you know, an anachronism, etc. But
do you think? I mean, that's the point. I mean, I was very lucky to have worked with Sir Peter Hall and had a fantastic. I think when he was at his best with doing Shakespeare, he'd really nailed his vision of it, his philosophy, you might say. I'm playing a role that I know you've played before. That was in Antony and Cleopatra. But I remember him saying that another 80 years, 100 years, it'll be gone. And I just wonder, do you think that even today, do you think Shakespeare has a relevance to today's audience? That's a question I've slipped in there.
I actually, Jerry, I think it's in your hands. It really is. It's how you guys teach it, how you guys, you know, you bring your students to London, and they're imbibed into, you know, the theatre, and that's what it is. I mean, for us as performers, actors, is that we do not really sit down and write essays about, you know, certain speeches and aspects of the play that, you know, that ticks the various boxes which is required for an education and for a certificate. We simply read it and we listen to what is being said to us, and we think, do I understand this? And, you know, we get our dictionary by the father and son crystals, or we get our onions and we go through it, and, you know, then you discover that actually that definition, although it's you know, it's 99% informative, that there's that 1% that is not, it isn't clear enough. So you do it, you rehearse, and then all of a sudden, just by saying it, you see what it means. And it's not about understanding and definitions, it's about feeling and perceiving. And, you know, it's really difficult because, you know, you have fame and money. God give us some, please. Really, in the end, what our what was that phrase in Star Trek? Our prime directive was to stimulate the imagination, not to boldly go, but to stimulate the imaginations of our audience. And you know, I do not think, I think it's a very, very fatalistic opinion to say that, you know, in 100 years, in 80 years, it won't happen. It'll disappear because, you know, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Americans, the South Americans, the Spanish, the Danish, you know, have discovered the magic of that language, you know, and, you know,
it's the stories. The stories will never be lost. I mean, the stories themselves. A couple of last questions. I mean, there's an awful lot on Shakespeare, but I'm not going to plow on with all of these. But there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, says Hamlet. So how true is that in your own beliefs?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, God, we
are learning from doing a play. We're learning something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the problem is, it's like everything. You know, it's like life. Well, it's not like life. It is life. You know, the more you know, the more you don't know. Yeah. What was it? Donald Rumsfeld who said, you know,
known knowns and known unknowns. Known knowns. Yeah, whatever it was, I can't remember.
Yeah, well, you know, knowing and not knowing that we not know and not know.
Probably Shakespeare had it a lot. He said it a lot more.
I think you just said it. Yes.
Yeah, but that's a good sign about. I mean, a good way to. I mean, I should have linked that earlier for you with the how a play or a role can teach you something about self, and ourselves around us. Yeah.
And you know, it's not you know, you can't really itemize what you learn. So firstly, very basically, you learn to breathe properly. I mean, you learn to breathe properly when you're doing a Shakespeare play, because the as we're saying, the idea requires you know, muscularity, not only of thought but of breath. You know, you learn to think better. You learn to concentrate. Yeah, and if you are doing fights, you get more agile, you get stronger, etc. And you learn to act in tights. Lovely.
That's good. Well, on that humorous image of you in tights, if to be or not to be is the question, then what is the answer?
What is the answer?
Yeah,
to be or not.
If to be or not to be is the question, what is it?
That is the answer.
We don't know. It's
no, that is the answer is to be or not to be.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
it was a kind of a
I
tribal.
know, I know what you're saying. Yeah, that is the answer.
Yeah.
Because Hamlet never answers it.
Yeah. It's like
Well, it is, yeah,
what is
who is bear, etc., etc. He never gives it an answer.
I always come away with it. I mean, it's funny being where I am here.
Yeah.
Religion has a very powerful hold. Elsewhere, maybe not. But it's funny. But over the years, and you know, I doing one of the princes in playing one of the princes in Cymbeline years ago. You know, that fear no more the heat, the sun. But coming into the understanding that sometimes, you know, Shakespeare not very religious in the idea that we thought, much more open, not unreligious, but much more secular in their religion. And it's one last question I'd like to ask you. The student has asked, I find it hard to believe, this is probably a student that has been listening to me rant on about it, but I find it very hard to believe that the man from Stratford wrote the plays. Can you convince me that he did?
No, I can't. I can't. You know, it's really difficult. It's all conjecture. It's all good ideas. Yeah. What we know is that a man called Shakespeare wrote these plays, which has enriched our lives. It has enriched our language. It has challenged us. And you know, I don't know. I mean, is it Henry Wriothesley? Who knows? But we know that there were the Chamberlain players, and their writer was William Shakespeare. And I don't think there'd be any kind of value in finding out we didn't or did, because we know
Mark Rylance is a great believer, obviously, that it was more possibly Francis Bacon, but likely a number of people. And there's a lot of belief that it was not a committee like some bureaucratic department today, but the link for me was thinking about during the McCarthy period, when you'd have writers, I mean, Dalton Trumbo and others, writing under a pseudonym to protect themselves. And maybe that's something we can't really understand, what fear is like for writers until you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're probably right. But, you know, it's like the old children's aphorism fairy tale about the chicken that laid the golden egg. And you know, every day that chicken would lay a golden egg, and the people said, this is marvelous. Then some clever clogs came up with the idea that perhaps, well, the chicken must have all the eggs within it. So what we should do is just cut open the chicken and we'll just have the eggs. We won't need to wait every day for a golden egg. And so they cut up the chicken, and that was the end of golden eggs. So it's that.
That's left unsaid, yeah.
Yes, it's wonderfully challenging, and you know the kind of forensic detectives in us, you know, will go for that. But you have to remember that the opinion of somebody in 2021, as opposed to the life of some plays, some poems, some sonnets that have lasted 500 years, there really is no competition. There really is no competition at all. Now, it is not the gods that have made these things last that long, although they're there doing what they do, and it is not the opinion of us. It is all of us. It is all. It is, you know, it is the people, you know, the thinkers, the not so thinking thinkers. It's everyone.
I think
when they misquote, think, oh my God, I wish I had written that. Oh, isn't that great? I wish I'd said to be or not to be. Yeah, well, what about now? Oh my God. I could have said, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Yeah. You see what I mean? It's you know, it's what we are, you know, as humans. It's not, you know, it doesn't, it's, you know, it's in English, but it's not, it is about humanity. The plays are not about, you know, the king. The play is about how people behave in situations. That
if I could jump in there on situations and how people behave. I mean, situation comedy of a kind is something that you've had an amazing journey with. Quite amazingly, for an actor from the UK, you are able to, if I use a Shakespearean image, you can straddle the Atlantic, playing roles in both countries. And brings me to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Got a lot of questions. I'm not going to be able to go through all of these. I wouldn't want to keep you much longer. But I've got one, actually from the principal of the American school, Jeffrey Butler. Jeffrey Butler said he was a marathon runner.
Yeah.
Joseph Marcell, have you ever run a marathon? And if you did, would you cheat by using a taxi?
I could. I wish I could have cheated. I did the first London Marathon in 1971. In those days, it was called the Mars Marathon.
Yes, I remember. And Chris Brasher. All of that,
yeah.
Wasn't it? Chris Brasher.
Yeah, Chris Brasher, yeah. And then that year, no, not 1971, 1981.
Yeah.
1981.
I saw after medal there, I think.
Yes, I still got my little medal. In those days, a tiny, tiny medal, no flags or anything. And then I went off to Stratford the next year to the Midsummer Night's Dream. But would I cheat? No. God in heaven, the pain is, it's inexorable. The last thing you want to do is cheat. It's like, you know, you come to you practice. I remember we practiced, we did 21 miles, and, you know, and people talked about the wall. And you have to remember, in those days that, you know, it isn't like now. There wasn't as much information. The shoes weren't as good. You know, the costumes weren't as good. The tracksuit weren't as good. You know, there are a lot of abrasions and broken toes and stuff. And you do your 21 miles, your 22 miles, and then the day comes and you get to Greenwich, and you're coming down into town, and you get to the East End of London. You know, you're on cobblestones, and people give you drinks. Sometimes people lace it with alcohol, which is the last thing you want, of course, because it goes straight down to your legs, and that's it, you're finished. And you keep going, and you keep going, and you come to 20 miles, and it really is a war. You have to make yourself do it. And then you do, and all of a sudden, you know, that marathon pace where, you know, you could take the news to the king of the defeat, and all of a sudden it's like, then you come to your 26 miles, and then somebody says, oh yeah, there's another 0.2 to go. It's 26.2 miles. Yeah. And it hurts like, anyway, and no, but what it does for you is that, well, it did for me. It teaches you that actually, it really doesn't matter to be first. Being first doesn't matter. What matters is that you finish what you set out to do. And
Jeffrey was very naughty about that then.
No, Jeffrey Butler, you have to remember, is a situation comedy, and so, you know, it would not be funny if he'd suffered his 26.2 miles. No.
Well, let me just as we come into the final leg of our chat here. Obviously, we're referring to Geoffrey Butler, the butler in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I mentioned to you before we went up that, incredibly for me, a lot of very young students know the show. A few questions to throw at you. Some of them are, and you can answer this later, any news on there being a revival of this? But one question, I nearly went when I saw you in LA all those years ago, whatever it was, nearly went to see a live recording, and of course I forgot, it's a live show. So who was one of your favorite guest appearances on the show? And what's it like, from another contributor, what's it like to do live television? Does it compare, does it differ from live theatre?
Okay. My favorite, and what was the difference? Live theatre. My favorite, well, I should say Donald Trump, really, but
was he on?
Oh, yes.
Was he?
He was on our show, yes.
Oh my
President
God.
Donald Trump was on our show, yes, before he became president.
Yeah, sure. Oh, wow.
Yeah. But my favorite was Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Oh, wow.
That was my
darling, Adam. Yes.
Darling.
Yes.
Darling.
Wow, that's a study in itself.
Wow.
Wonderful. And why was that? Why?
Because I made 3 commercials in my career, and one was for a product called Myers Beds in London, and I think it was in the 70s. Yeah, about 75, 76, and she was, she was in at the height of her powers, and yeah, and I had to ask her a question because I was playing a reporter of some kind, and I don't know whether she was well briefed when she came on the show and we were doing the read through. She said, "I remember you were in there," and I thought, "Yes, darling, you are. I admire it. You are clever. You are very, very smart, and do
your homework. That's very.
It doesn't matter whether she did or not. It was perfect, and she became. I just fell in love with her."
Wow.
Yeah.
Another question then was, just to prompt you on, what is the difference then between that live theatre, which I know, obviously we both know, but how does that compare with live television?
Yes. Well, in our case, it's entirely different. They are the same thing.
Oh, really?
In the sense, yeah, you have to perform without retakes, without anything. So the audience comes into the show, to the Fresh Prince. It's different with other shows, but with our show, you would come in, there'd be a warm-up man who would, get you warmed up, put you in a giggling mood.
Yeah.
And then, we'd be introduced and we'd do the show. We'd do scene 1, there'd be a break while they move the cameras to the next location, and we do it like that, like that, like that, like that, like that. It would take an hour, take maybe 2 hours, 2 hours and a half. And then the audience would applaud and go home. And then we would do it again to clean up the mistakes, clean up the camera, which mistakes, whether they were camera or sound or actor or costume, just clean them up. But the essential part of it and the essence of the show is that it is live.
Right.
So simply what they did, it's called what we used to call it, Will and it was sweetening. They simply sweetened the show.
Wow.
So it is live, yeah. It is like a theatrical performance, and it has the same rigor, the same expectation of the actors, the same nervousness, butterflies, as if you were walking onto a stage.
Wow, and knowing your lines. I mean, was that something?
And knowing your lines, that's the killer. Knowing your lines.
Yeah. Do you think you had an advantage over, let's say, some of the American, maybe one or two of the younger ones, because you had a theatre background? No, they were right on the button.
Because we've been rehearsing for a week. Yeah.
I'd like you to tell the listeners, because I think I know. I think you've told me. What's the connection with you and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Patrick Stewart. And I might just take us back to Shakespeare. Captain Jean Picard. Yeah.
Well, there's an organization called ACTER, which is Alliance, ACTER, Alliance for Creative Theatre Education and Research, which was run by the Royal Shakespeare Company and the literature department of the University of California at Santa Barbara. And the thing was organized, the president of that organization at the university was a man called Professor Homer Swander. Now, Professor Homer Swander was a good friend of Patrick Stewart. And so there was a cross-fertilization between the kind of academic side of Shakespeare and the performing side. So you had the whole Shakespeare Institute, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Santa Barbara, you know, exchanging ideas. And so they created this thing called ACTER, where members of the Royal Shakespeare Company would take a 5-man production of a Shakespeare play and a modern classic and do a lecture or give a lecture on a Shakespeare character that they, you know, that they've played. And they'd be directed by, you know, a stalwart of the Royal Shakespeare Company. So I did Angelo in Measure for Measure, 5-man, which meant I played Angelo, I played, I don't know, Mrs. Overdone or whatever her name is. You know, I played about 7 roles, and then I had to play Angelo at the same time. Sometimes I was talking to myself, etc., which was wonderful, just wonderful. And we did Endgame. I played Nag, so I was in the barrel and stuff. And then I just played Othello in London, so my talk was about Othello. And we were doing this, and we were in the University of California in Los Angeles in 1987, and it was an event. Whenever the Royal Shakespeare Company goes to California, it's an extraordinary event. I mean, everybody wants to be there. It's the artistic kind of high point of that city. I mean, they love their theater because they don't have much of it, you know. And so we did this, and we were there for 2 weeks, and it was, you know, sold out. It was wonderful. It was great. And then in 1990, 3 years later, The Fresh Prince came out, and somebody said, no, it went, a man called Brandon Tartikoff, who ran NBC television at the time, with Quincy Jones and Andy and Susan Borowich, the creators, and a man called Benny Medina, decided that they were going to go with unknown people that American television hadn't seen before. American television hadn't seen a so-called British actor, black British actor, before. They've had, you know, Sammy Davis Jr. and people like that putting on British accents, but they've never had the McCoy minus 7 years anyway. So you know, they said, okay, we can get because Will is new. I mean, Will's from Philadelphia, so he's not from California. He's not from New York. Well, we have to get people that, you know, we got to keep it fresh and new. So they said, well, what are we going to do for the butler? Said, well, you know, we'll have to find somebody. And so somebody said, this American said, no. We want the McCoy. We want genuine. I said, did anybody see the Royal Shakespeare Company when they came here about 3 years ago at UCLA? And they said, yeah. Do you remember the guy who played that role in that thing? Oh, yes, that's the man. Get him. That's the one. Get that man. So they called the Royal Shakespeare Company. And of course, I was doing something else by then. I think I was doing the London premiere of a play by August Wilson called Joe Turner's Come and Gone.
Yeah.
Irony. Irony of ironies. and so they got a casting detective lady in the United States who was a friend of my agent. She said, look, they're looking for your client. Where? And she said, he's in London. He's in the play. What's the matter? I said, well, they want to see him. And I said, okay, well, what do they want him to do? We want him to put this thing on tape. So I put this thing on tape, and we sent it off. And in those days, everything took 5 days. So they got the tape. They said, okay, we want him here tomorrow. My agent said, sorry, you can't have him here tomorrow. He has another week to do on this play. When he's done that, he'll be available to you. And they said, okay, we'll wait. So I went to California. I met Will Smith. I met James Avery. We became firm friends. I did this audition and they all fell about. Not least, I think it was my accent that really got them more than anything else. My accent and my attitude. And it was all thanks to Patrick Stewart, who, after he'd seen me play Othello, said, I had heard that Paul Robeson had played Othello with Dame Peggy Ashcroft, but I had never seen, this is the first time I've seen a black actor play Othello, and it's a most extraordinary play. I didn't realize, how important this play is. Before it was just, a presentation. Now, you made it real for me. So I want you to come and work with, will you come back to the RSC and do this tour? Oh God, bloody tour. But yes, and it was the best decision, yes. Because what the Fresh Prince has done for me, apart from giving me a nice pension, has made me, has validated my life's work.
Yes.
So I can do anything.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, I've got to bring everything to an end. Good things must come to an end.
Yes, even wanting more is always the way.
One last question. Is there going to be a revival? What do we have? What's hot off the press from you?
Well, hot off the press is that there's what is known as a reboot of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but it's set in Philadelphia, and it's a kind of prequel to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, as it were. So it's more, I don't mean this in any derogatory sense at all, but it's more down market and it's more raw. So it's not about the kind of genteel kind of Bel-Air society. It's more, yeah, it's more ghetto and hard.
Well, so has the family fallen on hard times or something?
No, it's before the family became wealthy. Yeah.
So it's younger versions of you all.
Yes. Or us before we became what we became, relocated before we became what we became. Yeah. And so it's interesting because Will wanted all of us to get together to meet the new people, but we're all busy. So we'll probably do that in November, but it'll still be called the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Right.
But what I want, I want everybody to be loyal to both of them, be loyal to us and be loyal to the new, the rebooting of it.
Right.
But yes, that's the only thing at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I have a movie coming out called The Exorcism of God. It's Exorcism of God. It's a Mexican movie, horror film.
You mentioned the director is
Alejandro Hidalgo.
Yeah,
Alejandro Hidalgo. Yeah,
you said he was very good. Very
yeah.
Right.
So look out for it.
I will. Well, listen, I'm going to bring this to an end. It's been an absolute honor to have you with us. I don't want you to go anywhere when I push the stop button, but I do want to know.
Well, you just remember to tell your students the things we went through when we were younger. What was it called? Outpost and all those.
I saw it on your CV. Yeah, there it is. And I thought, that is for that bizarre thing that I'm in a sort of a schizophrenic way now. I look at that and I go, there it is on your CV, and I go, I was in something called that. What? that's what I was in. It's like another life.
Actually, the template for data.
Yes, yeah,
that's,
I remember you saying.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Joseph, thank you enormously. The contribution you're making, helping me to make for the students here is to show them that there is a world elsewhere, Coriolanus, that is beyond the kind of the reach of the science and the engineering, the technology fields that are pursued hugely here. That there is a world of the performing arts, and under the umbrella there are many crafts, many skills.
Yeah,
it's amazing to have experienced artists like yourself coming into.
Thank you.
So I thank
thanks,
you.
and I'm really I'm honored. I'm honored and flattered that you've taken the time, and God bless you. Kind of enrich your spirit is all I can say.